They called it the end of Earth. Across 10,000 worlds, the announcement spread in bursts of light and triumph. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, delegates rose from crystal thrones and metal nests and pressure tanks to applaud as the blue planet burned on the holoscreen. Human orbital rings collapsed in glowing arcs. Defense satellites died one by one. Above the planet's clouds, the last fragments of the Sol fleet scattered like sparks from a dying forge. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy agreed on something. Humanity had been broken. The Verek Dominion, who had led the assault, declared the war finished before the wreckage had even cooled. Their admirals stood beneath banners of black iron and silver flame, speaking of order, peace, and the removal of a violent species too stubborn to kneel. Council commentators called it a necessary victory. Traders reopened routes that had been closed during the campaign. News feeds looped the same images again and again. Human cruisers exploding over Luna, marine fortresses collapsing into the Atlantic, cities swallowed by smoke. On distant worlds, crowds gathered in public squares to celebrate. Some cheered because they had feared humanity's rise. Some cheered because the Council had told them to. Others cheered simply because it was safer to join the roar than question it. No one noticed how little the humans said. On Earth, the surface was ruin. New Alexandria was a skeleton of towers jutting through ash. Pacifica Station lay shattered across the ocean in a field of burning debris. The deserts of North Africa glowed at night where antimatter strikes had turned whole regions to glass. Millions were dead. Millions more were missing. The air itself tasted like metal and cinder. Yet beneath the broken world, deep under mountains, oceans, and collapsed capitals, sealed doors remained closed. In bunkers older than the war, hidden under layers of stone and alloy, red lights flickered to life. In the Atlantic Defense Vault, Admiral Elias Vance stood before a wall of screens as casualty reports rolled in. His uniform was scorched at the collar. Blood darkened one sleeve. Around him, officers moved in exhausted silence, their faces pale in the bunker glow. "Confirmed?" he asked. A technician swallowed. "Yes, sir. The Council has formally recognized Earth as neutralized." For a moment, no one spoke. Then a quiet laugh escaped someone at the back of the room. Not from humor. From disbelief so deep it had nowhere else to go. Vance looked at the burning image of Earth on the central display. His home. Their home. Wounded, blackened, bleeding fire into space. "They think this is over," he said. No one answered, because no one needed to. He turned from the screen and faced the command deck. Men and women from every surviving branch stood waiting. Navy, Army, Orbital Command, Intelligence, engineers, even civilians wearing factory uniforms and emergency militia bands. Tired, grieving, furious. "Broadcast on all surviving channels," Vance ordered. His voice was low, but it cut through the bunker like steel. "Initiate Ashfall Protocol. Wake every hidden fleet. Open the black shipyards. Recall every deep cover unit and resistance cell. Full wartime authority is now in effect." The officers stared at him for half a breath. Then the room erupted. Encrypted signals burst outward from Earth's dead zones, slipping through wreckage and jamming fields, racing into the dark, toward the asteroid belts, toward forgotten moons, toward shipyards buried inside hollowed comets and stations listed as destroyed years ago. And all across the silent reaches of human space, something began to wake. The galaxy celebrated Earth's fall that night. It did not yet understand that humanity's silence was not surrender. It was the sound of a species drawing breath before it struck back. The galaxy mistook silence for victory. For 13 standard days after Earth's fall, not a single human fleet challenged the occupation lines. No distress calls reached the Council. No retaliatory strikes hit the Verek staging worlds. Across the central systems, commentators spoke with smug certainty about humanity's collapse. Analysts explained that the species had finally learned its place. Council banners were raised over captured colonies, and governors were appointed to manage the ruins of human territory. The stars relaxed. That was the first mistake. Far beyond the mapped trade lanes, inside the shattered belt of an unremarkable dead system, a mining asteroid split open along a seam no scanner had ever noticed. What had looked like rock and ice for 20 years unfolded into armor plate and launch rails. Beneath layers of dust, a warship the size of a city came alive. Its hull was matte black, its engines hidden deep within armored chambers, its weapons sealed behind false stone until this exact moment. Around it, 12 more asteroids opened. The first Shadow Fleet had been asleep since before the war began. Reactor online. Gravity spine stable. Missile vaults green. Awaiting command authorization. On the bridge of the flagship Retribution, Captain Amara Singh stood before the main display as system lights crawled from red to white. She had been ordered into deep reserve 3 years earlier under orders so secret that even most of Earth's admirals had never known her fleet existed. Now, for the first time since entering concealment, the hidden crew saw a live transmission from Seoul. Admiral Vance appeared in fragments through static. His face was harder than before, older somehow, as if Earth's burning had carved years into him in a single night. "By authority of Ashfall Protocol," he said, "all concealed assets are now active. Repeat, all concealed assets are now active. Earth has been struck. The Council has declared us finished." A murmur rolled across the bridge. Vance continued. "They believe we are dead. We will not correct them. Maintain blackout. Await strike coordinates." From this moment forward, every hidden yard, every reserve fleet, every embedded cell moves under wartime command. The transmission ended. For a long second, nobody moved. Then Singh lifted her chin. "Signal the task groups. We proceed to Phase 1. Across human space, identical scenes unfolded. In the frozen caverns beneath Europa, laboratories sealed by ethical bans reopened. Weapons once judged too dangerous were pulled from containment. Autonomous drone swarms were fed target libraries. Quantum intrusion engines, designed for cyber warfare so severe they had nearly been outlawed, were loaded into stealth couriers. On Mars, civilian fabrication towers stopped printing shelter frames and agricultural housings. Their assembly lines rotated on hidden tracks, revealing military tooling beneath their harmless outer shells. By dawn, they were producing railgun barrels, armor composites, and munitions by the million. On occupied colony worlds, resistance cells received the same coded phrase. "Ashfall active. Endure. Await thunder." In underground shelters, survivors who had lost homes, families, entire cities, lifted their heads at those words. Some wept. Some laughed. Some simply clenched their hands and kept going, because now they knew. Earth had not surrendered. It had disappeared on purpose. At the edge of Verek-controlled space, an occupation fleet drifted in comfortable formation around the shipyards of Kelt Prime. Their commanders were relaxed, bored even. Human resistance had been minimal. Their supply chains were secure. Their scans showed nothing but cold void and scattered debris. They never noticed the shape moving inside the debris field. Not until 12 black warships slid free from the dark with engines cold and weapons hot. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Singh looked at the enemy formation blooming across her tactical display and gave the order humanity had waited 13 days to hear. "Targets confirmed," she said. "Break silence." And in the darkness between the stars, Earth finally answered. The first ships died before their crews understood they were under attack. At Kelt Prime, the Verek occupation fleet hung above the shipyards in neat ceremonial lines, their hulls lit by the cold gold glare of the system's star. They were not in battle formation. Their point defenses were running at half alert. Cargo lighters drifted openly between cruisers. Dock officers argued over tribute schedules and salvage claims from Earth's ruins. Then the void split apart. The human fleet did not arrive with fanfare. No broad-spectrum broadcast. No challenge. No demand for surrender. Just black warships sliding out of the debris field like blades pulled from a grave. Their hulls reflected almost no light. Their engines burned in silence for 3 heartbeats, and then every gun on the lead ships fired at once. The first volley gutted the Verek command carrier. Its shields tried to rise, flickered once, and failed under a saturation strike of antimatter lances and kinetic spears moving too fast for interception. The carrier's spine snapped in a line of white fire. Seconds later, its reactor bloom lit the orbit in a soundless starburst. Only then did the alarms begin. Enemy contact! Enemy contact! Captain Amara Singh stood on the bridge of the Retribution with her hands clasped behind her back as tactical icons bloomed red across the display. "Split the formation," she ordered. "Hammer the escorts. Jam their relays. No one leaves orbit." Acknowledgements flashed back instantly. The Shadow Fleet broke into attack wings. Some dove straight into the enemy screen, railguns roaring. Others vanished under cloaked distortion, only to reappear inside missile range. Human drones poured forward in swarms, small as insects and twice as vicious, crawling over Verek hulls to blind sensors and cut weapons from inside maintenance seams. Every move was precise. Every strike rehearsed. This was not rage unleashed blindly. This was rage sharpened into doctrine. Across occupied human territory, the pattern repeated. At the moon of Talos Reach, a Verek fuel depot erupted from within as sleeper agents activated demolition cores hidden months earlier in captured cargo. In the Irinda corridor, Council logistics convoys disappeared one after another, ambushed by vessels previously listed as destroyed. At Harrogate, human marines dropped from stealth carriers directly onto an enemy orbital ring, fighting room to room through smoke and venting air until the station guns turned and fired on the fleet they had once protected. The galaxy watched in disbelief. News channels that had spent 2 weeks celebrating Earth's defeat switched to frantic emergency coverage. Council delegates shouted over one another in panicked session halls. Admirals demanded explanations no intelligence bureau could provide. How many hidden fleets did humanity possess? How many shipyards had survived? How long had this counterattack been planned? No one had answers. Because the truth was worse than any of them imagined. Humanity had planned for defeat from the very beginning. On Luna's ruined far side, buried beneath a crater officially recorded as a bomb impact site, Admiral Elias Vance stood in the central war room and watched red markers vanish one by one from the strategic map. Kelt Prime, Talos Reach, Irinda, Harrogate. Victories. But not enough. A young signals officer turned from her console, pale with exhaustion. "Sir, resistance cells on 6 colony worlds are requesting authorization to rise." Vance studied the map. Human worlds still burned at the edges. Enemy fleets still occupied sole approaches. Entire populations were still in chains. He gave a single nod. "Authorize all cells. Send Phase 2 codes." "Yes, sir." The signal burst outward. On prison moons, factory worlds, and occupied cities, hidden transmitters woke. Locked weapon caches opened. Saboteurs emerged from crowds. Former civilians took up rifles, charge cutters, stolen armor, anything they could carry. The rebellion spread not like fire, but like pressure cracking a dam. The Verek had thought they'd broken humanity when Earth fell. Instead, they had united it. Back at Kelt Prime, the last enemy cruiser tried to flee the battlefield with engines burning hard. Captain Singh watched it run, then raised one hand. "Forward batteries," she said calmly. "End it." The Retribution fired. A single tungsten spear crossed the dark and punched through the cruiser from bow to stern. The ship came apart in a widening cloud of molten wreckage. On every human channel, one message followed. Earth lives. Fight on. Panic moved faster than light. It swept through the core worlds in flashes of red text, broken signals, and military reports no one wanted to believe. In the polished towers of council capitals, officials who had toasted Earth's destruction now locked themselves in secure chambers and demanded updates from admirals who suddenly had none to give. Trade routes were collapsing. Occupation fleets were vanishing. Human resistance networks were rising on worlds already declared pacified. The galaxy had spent years calling humanity reckless. Now it learned what reckless looked like with discipline behind it. On Verek Prime, Supreme Marshal Tovan stood in the war sanctum beneath a dome of black crystal while a dozen commanders shouted over one another. Holographic maps glowed above the central table, each one worsening by the minute. Red sectors multiplied across former Verek holdings. Human attack groups struck in impossible patterns, never staying long enough to be pinned, never hitting where prediction engines placed them. "They should not have this many ships," one commander snarled. "They do not," another snapped back. "They are reusing jump corridors and false signatures. They want us to think they are everywhere." "They are everywhere," said a third, voice cracking. "Our border forts have gone dark." Tovan silenced them with a raised hand. At the center of the map, Sol still burned faintly, wounded but alive. Around it, human-controlled vectors spread like fractures in glass. "How close are they?" he asked. No one wanted to answer. Finally, the intelligence minister spoke. "At current pace, 2 weeks to the inner defense ring. Less, if the colony uprisings continue." A stillness fell over the chamber. 2 weeks. The same species they had declared extinct was now driving a spear toward the heart of their empire. Far from the council chambers and palace bunkers, the war looked even worse. At Juno Crossing, a Verek battle group dropped from jump to reinforce a collapsing line, only to find the beacon network had been hijacked. Human cyber warfare teams fed them false coordinates, guiding half the formation into a mine cloud seeded hours earlier. The surviving ships emerged into the guns of waiting destroyers and died in disciplined silence. At Orphean Station, Council security forces tried to suppress a human labor revolt inside the fusion yards. They failed when the station's life support grid, rewritten by hidden human code, sealed bulkheads behind them and vented their armories into space. By sunrise, the station transmitted on open channels again. Occupied no longer. And on 100 worlds, species who had once applauded Earth's downfall began to understand something deeper and colder than fear. Humans were not fighting for territory anymore. They were fighting so the galaxy would remember. In a ruined school beneath the shattered remains of New Jakarta, children sat wrapped in thermal blankets while the ceiling trembled from distant launches above. Their teacher, a former historian named Lena Ortez, stood by a cracked wall screen showing a map of human victories. The children were too young to understand strategy, too young to grasp empires and counter-offensives. But they understood one thing. "Are we winning?" a small boy asked. Lena looked at the map, at the worlds reclaimed, at the names of the dead scrolling beneath them, at Earth's scarred image at the center of it all. Her throat tightened. "Yes," she said softly, "but it costs." Above them, another launch thundered skyward. In Luna's buried command bunker, Admiral Vance listened to casualty projections in grim silence. Every victory came with losses. Every reclaimed colony revealed mass graves, burned cities, prison camps, orbital debris fields full of civilian ships that had never made it out. Some officers called for total annihilation now. No mercy, no negotiations, no restraint. He understood the temptation. That was what frightened him most. A communications officer turned toward him. "Sir, intercept from Council emergency channels. They're evacuating archives, treasury cores, political families." Vance's eyes stayed on the map. "Good," he said. "Let them run." The officer hesitated. "Sir." Vance finally looked up, and there was no triumph in his face. Only exhaustion. Only iron. "Fear is arriving before we do," he said. "That means they've started to understand." Across the galaxy, cheers had turned to whispers. Then whispers turned to silence. Because now every species knew the truth. Earth had fallen. But humanity had risen angry. By the time the human fleets reached the inner defense ring of Verek Prime, the galaxy had already gone quiet. No victory songs echoed through Council space now. No commentators spoke with smug certainty about Earth's fall. The same networks that had once replayed humanity's destruction now showed evacuation columns, burning shipyards, and emergency sessions abandoned halfway through as delegates fled their worlds. Entire empires watched from behind sealed borders, afraid to speak too loudly, as if even sound itself might draw human attention. At the center of it all stood Verek Prime. The world that had ordered Earth broke and glittered beneath layers of orbital defense platforms, fortress moons, and warships drawn from every surviving loyal sector. It was the largest defensive line ever assembled in recorded galactic history. Thousands of cannons, millions of drones. Enough firepower, the Council claimed, to shatter any fleet that tried to cross it. Humanity crossed it anyway. Admiral Elias Vance stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Resolute, staring through the forward display at the wall of enemy steel ahead. Around him, the final fleet held formation. Shadow fleet remnants, reclaimed colonial squadrons, resistance frigates welded together from salvage, civilian transports converted into missile barges, and warships so damaged they should have died 3 battles ago. But they had all come. Earth had called, and humanity had answered. "Final transmission from the Council," the comms officer said quietly. "They demand immediate withdrawal. They warn that any further advance will justify total retaliation." A faint smile touched Vance's face, though there was no humor in it. "They used up that threat when they burned our world." He stepped forward. Every channel opened across the fleet. "For Earth," he said. The answer came back from thousands of ships, one voice in 1,000 shapes and accents. "For Earth." Then the battle began. The first wave was pure light. Human strike craft plunged ahead in impossible numbers, weaving through defensive fire to carve holes in the outer screen. Missile barges emptied whole arsenals in synchronized storms. Railgun platforms hidden behind the main line fired tungsten lances that punched through fortresses and kept going. Verek defense stations answered with beams hot enough to split cruisers apart, and space itself seemed to ignite between the two fleets. Ships died by the hundreds. But humanity kept advancing. Boarding pods slammed into fortress hulls. Marine battalions fought through corridors lit by sparks and decompression warnings. Saboteurs inside the ring activated dormant codes planted by spies years earlier. Whole defense grids blinked out at the worst possible moment. And when the flagship of Supreme Marshal Toven finally emerged to rally the Verek Center, the Resolute met it head-on. The duel lasted less than 4 minutes. The Verek flagship was larger, fresher, built for dominance. The Resolute was scarred, half-repaired, and held together by emergency welds and stubbornness. But one ship fought for command. The other fought for the dead. When the Resolute's spinal cannon fired, the Verek flagship cracked from bow to stern in a line of white ruin. The blast lit the world below like a second sunrise. And just like that, the ring broke. Hours later, human dropships filled the skies above the Verek capital. Panic spread through palaces, ministries, and command vaults. Leaders who had once ordered extermination now begged for negotiation. Some demanded mercy. Others offered tribute, surrender, anything at all. In the shattered Hall of Dominion, surrounded by broken banners and the surviving members of the Galactic Council, Admiral Vance gave them their answer. "We could end you," he said. "You know that now." No one spoke. But Earth did not survive because we loved destruction. We survived because we refused to vanish. He looked across the silent chamber, at faces pale with fear. "You will disarm. You will pay reparations to every human world you burned. You will release every prisoner. And for the next 1,000 years, every child in every school on every council world will learn exactly what happened when the galaxy celebrated Earth's fall." No one argued. Outside, the guns were finally falling silent. Not because the war had been forgotten. Because the lesson had been learned. The galaxy had cheered for Earth's defeat. Now it would remember humanity's response forever.